Good Gab, sponsored by Skillskin, a nonprofit organization empowering individuals with disabilities through employment. What's up, Good Gabbers? Can you believe it? This is a special day. This is episode 52. We have made it an entire year. You're breaking out the party jacket. This is a big deal for us. And we've been bringing you a lot of guests this past year, connecting you to a lot of issues and helping, I think, us all understand a little bit more about Spokane, what's going on, and how we connect. And today is no different. Today we have former Mayor Condon here with us. Can't believe it. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me on. This is great.
Heck yeah. So, what have you been up to?
Well, believe it or not, it's been 3 years.
What?
Isn't that crazy? Yeah. It's been 3 years. There was this thing there in the middle called a pandemic, or not in the middle, but kind of in the beginning. So I left being mayor and spent a couple months figuring out what I was going to do and landed an amazing company, Primera Blue Cross. And so we have a health plan here in Washington State and Alaska. And I came on literally to lead in part the team in Eastern Washington. And at the time we had about 680 of my colleagues here in Spokane. We're now just over 1,000.
Wow.
More broadly in Eastern Washington, not all in Spokane, because like many companies, we've gone to a hybrid model, and we truly, and we'll get into that in a separate, but it's really expanded then. But we're still headquartered for Eastern Washington here in Spokane. Our headquarters is just north of Seattle, in Montlake Terrace.
Okay.
But anyway, so came onto that team, and then just a couple weeks later, met most of our employees here in Spokane, giving them a U-Haul box to say go home.
Go home.
And because we were going to go home for 2 to 3 weeks. So we literally had these, boxes, and they put their computers in them, and I was literally helping them, carry them to their car. And of course, going through the whole, the logistical reality of sending some 600 people back to their homes to run our company. And I've been there ever since. My role has evolved, which part of our strategy at Primera was in part my hiring of really looking, as a statewide company is also being placed statewide. So
right.
Hence. That 680 now is at 1,000 employees. People want to live in Eastern Washington, and so we did some hiring, and we also some of our employees moved to this side of the state because they want to, maybe they were from here and we're working. Every story is different. And then I also, in part of the sales leadership team for Washington and Alaska, and that's statewide.
Okay.
So I do that across the state and in Alaska.
So if companies are looking to, change providers, things like that,
yeah, totally. So
so
our typical, we work with our business partners in brokerage houses, and they work with employers. So my part of the business that I work in is all employer-based healthcare from 2 employees to 1,000. And so we have a lot of great plan sponsors in Spokane. You name them, we probably are. Their employees have Primera.
I know ours do. Yeah, we're Skillskin. We are on the plan.
And you know what, you guys, and this is what I love about Spokane. A couple things. One, there's a lot, but at Primera, we strive every day to make healthcare work better for our members, but then also for the community. So there's a couple things. So I love it that you brought up the Skillskin one. So one of them was obviously to have more access for our customers and for the community, and I'll talk about even yesterday what I was up to, but was to launch an HMO. And Skillskin is the first employer group in the state of Washington to take our Primera.
We jumped on board.
You jumped right on board. And that's an amazing partnership that we have here locally with MultiCare, and then also another partner in ours that we helped launch, which is Kinwell Medical, our health clinics. And so they're primary care clinics. Those launched here in Spokane. Actually, it was kind of funny. I was, 2 weeks later, I was sending people home. But a week later, I was doing a groundbreaking in the valley at one of the clinics. And I was like, well, I know how to do this. I've done enough groundbreakings.
of
Give me a
course.
shovel, and I'm like,
I got smile. Here we go.
so we had, like I said, the Kinwell clinics are out there, but that was really to focus on how do we get access to more people. And Spokane is also, I believe, if it's not the worst, it's one of the worst primary care access counties in the state. And so we've done a few things. One is for
There's just not enough providers.
There's just not enough providers, so they do it as a percentage, 1 per 100, or and so we are, and unfortunately and so that's the great thing about the medical schools, but that's why we launched these Kinwell clinics for our own members. But yesterday I was touring the WSU Medical School, and we were doing that with our CEO, Jeff Rose, who was in Spokane for the day yesterday, and we did that because we toured it because a couple years ago we were like, the community, our members, but more importantly, the communities we live in, we need more primary care doctors.
So how can you?
How do we do that? So back to how do we make healthcare work better? We underwrote 2 residencies, one in Pullman and actually one here in Spokane for pediatrics, because pediatrics in rural parts of the state and in Spokane, it doesn't exist. Yeah. So we're like, we need to make sure that we have these residencies in our community. So maybe they work for the Kinwell clinics, maybe they don't, but we just need more access. And
more providers is good for
everybody. And so, so for us, as a not-for-profit health plan, we want to invest back in the community we serve. That helps our members, but also helps the community at large.
Well, to get creative. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So the HMO plan, like we're going to build it up. Like your you can, thank Skillskin, everybody. We were the first, so we'll help build this thing.
Yeah, it's great.
Interesting. So I had heard that. I didn't know if that was true. Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, good. Keep it going, because I know there are some bumps in the road for us at the beginning.
Yeah.
But we know.
Well, any startup,
you got to build.
Yeah, right.
So we're excited to see how that goes.
So thanks for being a design partner for us.
Hey, one of our values is innovation.
And sometimes innovation gets a little bumpy, right?
Absolutely.
Yep.
And then it gets better.
Yeah.
Well, I love that. And so, what else is kind of happening in the Spokane community right now, in the healthcare side of things? You have a unique view.
Yeah, it's been interesting because another part of my position is to facilitate our social impact. Like I said, as a not-for-profit health plan, we look at how do we make investments back in our community. Before I came, the company our social impact team, led by an amazing gentleman, Paul Hawley, we looked at where can we make that impact, right? And so it's always hard because there's lots of good things to invest in and and put your time and effort into. But they selected 3: health equity, especially in rural parts of the state, and second one, homelessness, and then behavioral health. Those were the 3.
So tying in the health system to some of our largest issues that we have in our community.
Yeah, and then as someone who represents some 2.6 million people that are on the Primera Health Plan, 800,000 of those in Washington State. Where do we make investments in communities? So the other thing that was going on yesterday was our social impact team was up at Maddie's Place, and if you know what Maddie's Place is,
let us know.
Oh yeah, it's kind of interesting. It is in the old Vanessa Behan facility up there. Is at 9th and
Perry
District, 9th, the Perry
Yep.
District. Yeah. And so it was. They've taken that over, and Maddie's Place is a nursery in essence for drug-addicted babies and their mothers. And often in the healthcare system, those babies are immediately taken from their mothers, and put into the custody of the state. And there's an amazing woman who's been a nurse that thought there's a different way. So for many years, she's taken those babies as the foster mother, and then united them with the mothers in a way that could we make their trajectory look different? Could we?
That's impactful.
And so, but she could only do it, to take it to scale, you needed something. So we made a significant investment in Maddie's Place so that we can see that happen. And the reality is there's only 2 in the country.
Wow.
That the system, it's very innovative. There's been, the system doesn't, quote unquote, pay for it through normal circumstances. And so we'll see how this goes. There's already great outcomes. The other one is in the southeast, I believe, and they've had great outcomes. And on the individual basis, they've had that in Spokane. But this isn't dozens of babies that are born. This is hundreds of babies.
Immense need.
And so how do we change that trajectory? How do you take a point in a woman's life that's probably one of the most vulnerable times of having it, and maybe changing their trajectory together? But it needs to be done at a place. You get why the babies are not sent home. But at the same time, how do you do this? So that's so we put that into that health equity, and quite frankly, many of the women, if not overtly homeless, meaning living on the streets, or they have homeless, or housing insecurity, to say the least. And so, so we make these investments in, and so that's one exciting thing about working at Primera. Yes, we're a health plan, and yes, I work with employers, but as a not-for-profit health plan, and only here in Washington State and Alaska, I get to do a lot of those things, and that's how I was aware of Primera. I first was aware of Primera because we were talking earlier off mic, but just the where the fire department is, and really the reality of the healthcare that they deliver. Yep. So we, as a city, were looking at how do we get people not to go to the ER.
It costs so much.
It costs so much, right? Yeah. And so we did a 1-year study on how we could do this, and in essence, that's where you see these. I used to, the ARUs, the alternative response units. I'm forgetting some of my acronyms as I leave the city government, but these were, let's not send the fire engine, let's send at that time a Ford Explorer. I don't know what they use today. Just so that we aren't, and they were the non-emergency calls. Well, anyway, to do a pilot in government means, well, where does the money come?
Yeah, you need
well,
a partner.
Where do you need where do you get the money to fund something that's not in your typical budget? And so Primera came to the table with other health plans too. And I was like, wow, and it was pretty significant. And they're like, yeah, this, it may or may not affect the people that have Primera. But that being said, it's better for the system. It helps healthcare work better. So that's
part
actually
of that social impact.
Yeah, totally. And so that was kind of my initial relationship and understanding of Primera.
I understand why they would want you to, because that was something I, appreciated about you and your administration when you were mayors, like that you had a lot of data that you shared, and you would parse down to I could be like 5 and understand. Yeah. And I loved that. And so to be able to do that, in business too, and to say, hey, this is how we're impacting. I'm excited to see how that goes.
Yeah, you need, I heard as a friend of mine the other day, there's residents and there's citizens. And there's a difference. You can be a resident anywhere, but if you're going to be a citizen, it's a give and take. And you need to have corporate citizens too. You need to have businesses. And one neat thing about Spokane, I saw as mayor, and even before that, and definitely now, is the business community does come together. And
I know we're awesome at that.
Yeah, and each other. You literally can call them up. That was one thing that kind of attracted me to Primera. It's a large company. It's actually similar in size to the city of Spokane, 3,000 employees, that sort of thing. And I enjoy that because you have a lot of amazing resources that you can do things with. But it's also just here in Washington State. My boss was over, yesterday, our CEO.
You can know people.
Yeah, and he knows people. And so we were sitting over in the Wonder Building, that big food court area, and 2 people came over to him. It was like, hey, how you doing? And he's not from Spokane. He's been here a ton. But it was people that he knew that used to live in Seattle, or people he went to college with, and you're just like, and it is funny because another colleague,
awesome.
and everybody's kind of sitting there going, does this actually happen? And you're just like, this is kind of Spokane, right? And
so what's your story in Spokane? Like, were you born here? Like,
yes.
Why? Why Spokane?
Well, it's funny, my administration tagline was the city of choice. And there was a little article where we've created a city logo now, or tagline. I literally had just done that as my administration tagline, but I used to always, like any tagline, I said it all the time. People were like, oh, there he goes again, and when you don't have something to say, you just say it's the city of choice. And, to be honest, you just brought up why. We really started saying, like, literally, would this cause somebody to choose Spokane? And so instead of choose Spokane, which, by the way, was already taken, we did city of choice, building the city of choice. And because not only are we talking in the world, or in the country or in the state, But, Spokane ends at Francis, ends at Havana, ends at, 43rd or, and why would you live in Spokane versus our other great options? The Valley, out in Meade, Liberty Lake, Cheney. These are all awesome places to live. And I'm like, but we had become a donut city. Everybody that had mobility was moving outside the city. And so, I was like, we need to make sure that what we do would cause people to say, you know what, I want to live in Spokane, not 6 blocks away, right? And so you're like, well, what does that mean, David? And I'm like, well, I'll be honest with you. This was North Monroe was super controversial because but I was like, we have these great, neighborhoods, and it's, it's North Monroe, it's Perry District, it's Garland, it's Shadle, it's, these
corridors, are amazing.
Yeah, and so how do you do this? And I remember and we delayed it 2 or 3 years. And I would go to every, town hall meeting, church basement, you name it. And I remember these people just coming uncorked on me at one meeting. And I'm like, I go, excuse me, sir, where do you live? And he's like, well, I live, such and such, and I'm like, isn't that north of Francis? And he's like, oh, yeah, I live out, off of Waikiki. And I'm like, well, I appreciate your viewpoint, and I love that you're passionate, but I don't represent you. Yeah. I represent people that live around Corbin Park, and they really want this, And I go, we need to make sure we have mobility. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting we don't need to have
that's always in
but
the
I go
view.
And now drive down North Monroe or East Sprague.
It's amazing.
You drive down East Sprague. I'm on East Sprague, and so I drive down there, and, I go to the Union. We go and buy some, a chair at Tin Roof. I
know, I was at Benedito's a couple days ago.
I was just going to say, I had a team get together at Benedito's, and we had 30 people there for lunch because many of our team now works from home, and so we aren't in our office building, which is on East Sprague. I'm like, let's go have lunch. And so, people came out of I was like, 30 people. Here we go. Let's have lunch at Benedito. But you're just looking at these areas. And I think it really does, as you build a community, people need to be built around, there's a lot of, I'm not a sociologist, but, where is, they talk about 15-minute cities. So where is your 15-minute radius? And I think now with so many people that work from home, I think it's just so much more important. Because where do you build that community? Where do you, and one place used to be the workplace, literally physically, the 3 cubicles around you, and and you have your friend at, your best friend at work. Are they your,
here's your coffee. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, some people would have some really serious personal conversations with that person at work because there's no other interaction with them. It's almost like going to your own, psychologist or so, because you're, and so a lot of times, a lot of people, because they weren't in your school, they weren't in your, so you can have kind of, it's a safe space that in some ways, a lot of people have real serious conversations.
I think our executive producer, Dana, might feel that. Dana, thank you for always listening to me.
Your best friend at work. So anyway, as we look at that and why I chose, so I was born and raised here. I did go away. But I'm a boomerang like anybody else. I went to school in Boston, and then, I'm the youngest of 9 kids in a big Irish Catholic family, and so thanks to the
sounds familiar.
Yeah, thanks to the United States government paid for my college. I joined the Army, and so I was in the Army for about 8.5 years. Loved it.
So you could have been anywhere, but you chose
Spokane.
So
then I came back to Spokane. So and I used to always love talking to people that did, as adults, choose to live in Spokane. I used to literally, and they're like, all right, enough. But I'd be like, why did you choose? Because I wanted, what are those things? And you know what the number one reason?
I'm all ears.
What's the number one reason someone chooses to live where they live? Like literally the house, not the city. But when they get to a certain area, why are they choosing the house they live in?
Tell us.
The schools.
That almost seems like duh.
Yeah, well, no, but
it makes sense.
But the school system is number one, and I'll be honest. And as you looked at the suburban school districts, outside of the city of Spokane, people were going to those and they're great school districts. And so
I remember being as a kid, that was the kind of the word on the street. I went to Franklin Elementary.
Oh, you did? My wife did too.
Nice.
Yeah.
And. They were like, oh, Meade were the schools. My cousin was at Meade. I remember those days.
And that was, and that had not gone away in major ways, and so literally in my administration, we gave up a position in the mayor's office, meaning the salary, and we hired a person jointly with the school district. And I used to meet with the superintendent routinely, like every other week or something like that. I forget. And so we did different major projects, but part of the one, and people go, "What do you want your legacy to be?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm too young to have a legacy," but it makes me a little nervous. But
yeah, be like, "I'm not God yet."
What makes me super excited and people is we really, and my team worked hand in glove with the school district to go to a middle school system. I am not an education expert by any means, but I, so I'm sitting there picking the brains of the experts. Shelley Redinger, the superintendent, she goes, "Well, to be honest with you, we really need to move to a middle school system, but it's just prohibitive. There's just no way." And I'm like, "Well, let's not have it. No way.
Yeah, let's figure this out."
So, and a lot of it was property. It was, well, where are we going to put these things? And then what was really cool about it, and you think about it, my own daughter, who's now in 7th grade, I watched it, young women, girls, they decide what they're going to be like in that 6th to 7th grade time period. I suck at math. I'm not going to be, well, do you really suck at let's get, or I'm really amazing at math, but what does a woman do in math? Well, and so that 6th, 7th, and 8th grade is critical. It's
so formative.
It's so formative to where then do I apply myself in high school? What do I do when I have a few more choices on what I take? And so then it started, it was like aha moment, like this is different. Middle school is different.
And we can do something.
And we can do it. So that's where I had a huge map the size of both of these tables up in my office. And we hired a gentleman to kind of run our real estate portfolio to say, where do we have this? And I remember we were like, "Oh, Condon's going to sell all the city property." And we did sell some that was just.
Yeah, because you had a big vision.
Yeah, but but the vast majority of it, like 100 million plus of it, went to the school district. And that's where, out at Joe Albee and, was actually, city and then school district property, out off of North Foothills Drive. That was water property where our water department was, and it still is, but we scrunched it up. And not only that, but the parking lot is now Gonzaga Haven. And so it wasn't just the school district, but how do you do these other things? And because so that, when people say, that's going to be a game changer for the city for forever, because now moving to that type of system. Also, I love the magnets. I'll call it, I'm probably using the wrong words, but the magnet system that, where certain schools, like I did the State of the City one year at North Central because of their lab program, right? And, and so kids can choice in there or go there. And because of their lab program,
my niece and nephew chose into North Central because one of those niche programs.
Yeah, and that's and so
they're up in Elk.
Yeah, and and you look at these different systems. Or now they have a Spanish immersion grade school that it's not just you take Spanish. Every one of your subjects is in Spanish. And so that's great, and it's at the Libby Center now. I believe I shouldn't say where it is because I forget. But anyway, but it's and so, but what do you do? And so, if you build the best school district, you will have the best city.
And get more people to say choose Spokane.
Yeah, there you go. And so that's a reason why people choose. We were talking earlier. I was whole hog on the libraries and also the park system, and those are the two divisions within city government that really enrich people's lives, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's
I know
like,
we're in it, right?
Well, that's what I mean. Look at this, and I used to say, I went to one of the best libraries in I would say the world, or definitely United States, is in Austin, Texas. And I was down there for a conference. Actually, I was there for South by Southwest. Okay. And so I got on a scooter, and I'm like, I'm going to go to this library. And I'll be honest, we'd run them for their money now. The one thing they do have is their coffee shop is on the roof.
Oh, dang. I want a rooftop coffee shop.
Because I sat
transitions, you listen to this. Rooftop.
Yeah. I bet they dig it, now the library director is going to be like, why did you say that, but I remember people saying, libraries are something of the past, Mayor, and I'm like, no, they aren't. They are, and is the access to knowledge different? Absolutely. Books are still the cornerstone, don't get me wrong, but there's all these other interactions, or back to building those communities.
Yes.
One of the communities that we focused on was also, and it kills me, we still call it East Central. I always say we need to change these names to what they are, because the more affluent neighborhoods are known after their parks, right? You kind of go, Comst, I live in Comst.
I've never made that connection.
Or I live in Garland,
yes.
or excuse me, So they have Underhill Park there, and it's named Underhill. Why? Because it's under the hill. And I'm like, so
one of the best sledding hills
it's
ever.
amazing.
I lived right above that.
Yeah, right.
And we would go down
But
there. It was a
Liberty
good
Park
time.
is also Liberty Park used to be
like the crown jewel, right?
See, you need to run for mayor. And my dad lived there. My dad grew up on Liberty Park, right on the bluff. And it was what I would call it was Riverfront Park. It was where people, there was Manitou, gorgeous, go look at it, pretty flowers, kids bored to stiff. Go down to Liberty Park and you're going to go swimming and you're going to do, and they had all, as you drive through, and quite frankly, I-90 bifurcated it, but I looked at, and I'd be in the Shadle neighborhood all the time, and people's lives revolve around Shadle Park. They literally go to the library, They go to the swimming pool, they go to high school there. If you didn't know, the high school is on a long-term lease with the Parks Department or the city, I forget which, but in essence,
so that's
government.
How it's all
but I'm just like,
combined.
isn't it amazing? Not only that, but there's a water tower there. I mean, people think Shadle, they think of a water tower that's painted yellow and green, right? And I think, and again, you're just sitting there going, but the memories and the thoughts and the neighborhood council there has music there. There is no fences. Yep. I always say this. I go, how did that happen? Because normally government's like, well, my department, we only mow this. You mow that, and you mow this, and then one's brown because that department doesn't care about grass, but that one does. And I'm like, somehow Shadle Park figures it all out. And even when they redid the library there, I remember originally the furniture was all this oak furniture, which is typical library, but the kids would come in with wet swimming suits, and the library would be like, and you're like,
delaminate the furniture.
Yeah, delaminate, and so basically the library was like, well, let's just buy plastic furniture and this is what you want kids to do, I don't want them to ruin it. I'm not suggesting that, but if you
want them to be there.
Yeah, totally. That's
Access.
what you want them to be there. And so fast forward, then that's what we did with Liberty Park. We said, so the same thing, how could we make, so there was tennis courts there that weren't really being utilized a ton. I'm not suggesting they weren't at all, but that's why we put the library there, because now a kid in the Liberty Park neighborhood literally can spend, so now you can, and that's where we had started the PAL, the Police Activities League. And when you're sitting there and you see 150 kids that are playing with cops, and then go to the library, and then go to the swimming pool, and they can play basketball, and now I see them even putting more enhancements there as I drive past it. So, how do you build that community? How do you, and so, definitely, I love
I
River.
see the vision. And I was thinking the CSO tanks in Liberty Park too, right?
Yeah.
So
well, you are on
things.
top of it. Right?
Well, I'm a curious person.
Yeah.
Like you were saying,
I couldn't spell CSO when I became mayor. I was like, what is the combined sewer overflow? And to be honest with you, I affectionately say I became the toilet mayor. I got real smart on CSO. It was
was awesome.
It was I testified in Congress. What we did here in Spokane is now law. It was not law when we started. We're sitting here at the Central Library, and this beautiful overlook that overlooks the falls. That's a couple million-gallon tank that makes sure that sewage doesn't go into the Spokane River. And people are like, seriously? And I'm like, oh yeah, there's a big pipe. Until whatever this was 5 years ago, when there would be a big rainstorm and people were still flushing the toilet, it would go right into the Spokane River. And everybody's like, what? Now, when that happens, it goes into this huge tank, and then it gets pumped. Then it gets filtered and pumped over to the sewage treatment plant, and then goes into the river, treated and cleaned.
Well, those are just huge projects. Like my late.
Or have you been
buddy,
to Brick? Have you been to Brick West lately?
Yes, that
patio is a sewage tank. Yeah, you're having a beer on top of a big sewage tank,
and everyone's having a great time.
Yeah, totally right.
And helping our river, helping our community.
Totally right.
My late friend Mike Taylor was part of that.
He was
project.
it. Oh,
well,
wow.
He talked really highly of you.
What an
and
amazing.
He said when it was time to have this big vision, he's like, Mayor Condon was it.
He was amazing. Dear friend and advisor to me, and he led that. He was it. You sit there, and unfortunately, with his untimely passing, it still kind of makes me chilled right now. I went into surgery on Friday, and he was gone by Monday morning. Even Saturday, but just thinking of work, I was like, well, where's Mike Taylor? And of course everybody was so astounded, but as they named the sewage treatment plant after him, and everybody's like, what? I'm just like, as an engineer, that's your dream, right?
Exactly. The name is on the building.
And I was just like, who would, but this is something that is renowned in the world. That plant that he designed with hundreds of engineers and folks is, the cleanest plant in the world.
No.
Interesting enough, I think it is the only one that's in a state park. That one's in Riverside State Park, sewage treatment plant in a state park.
There's a theme here. Combining resources, layering things, getting creative.
And that is really what it's all about. Because even, as we did these sewage treatment plants, originally when I came on board, they were going to buy property, basically put a fence around them. And I was like, well, there's going to be a lot of acres, right? And, I'm not a real estate guy, but a city is fundamentally land. It literally stops and starts. So the thing we have
is finite.
Yeah, it's finite. There literally is a line. That city's, north of Francis is outside the city. South of Francis, in the city. So how do we, and you can see some of the choices we've made as a city, but I was like, if we're going to take all that acreage out of, we need to put it in production. And everybody's like, well, that's simple. Well, to be honest with you, an air lease for a private venture like Brick West is, I think, still the only one in the state, because people couldn't figure out how could a private entity, and then what's the rate of it? What do you charge? And, over off of Sprague again, across from the Pride Prep, that's a sewage treatment tank, and that was a grade school, or grade school all through high school that didn't have a playground, so we literally, and so then we put in a crosswalk, so they come across, and so they're playing soccer on top of a big sewage treatment plant. You're sitting there going, this one is one of the premier overlooks of the river, and hopefully
we're about to maybe put a zip line down there.
I love it.
What?
And actually, that was another crazy idea. One of the years of the State of the City, we did there was amazing things happening. I had one little line about a zip line.
I read it. I was like,
well, not only that, but I get pulled away afterwards. The media's there. They're like, so you just gave the State of the City. What's the zip line? And I'm like, what do you mean? I would budget, police, fire, all these other cool things. Zip line, and another real tough thing to do, because how do you don't want, the government's not going to run a zip line, but who's going to do it? How do you do it? But we built this, and it has this funny little thing that sticks out, and I was like, why did you do that? And I'm like, well, that's where the zip line gets bolted onto.
So cool. So this really begs the question for me. It's like, there's a lot of big ideas, but in my experience, rarely do they come to fruition. But you figured out a way to pull a lot of people together to get things done. What do you attribute that to? What can we learn so we can keep moving as a community in that direction?
Well, and I think we still are. I'm not going to say Spokane is the secret sauce, not David Condon. There's a lot of things, everybody talks about Expo, although as a guy that was born in that year, I'm sick of hearing about Expo, but how do we, but I'll be honest, when I was thinking about running for mayor, I Googled, could I be the mayor that brings Expo back? And then I'm like, oh, damn it. The next one, they were all booked up to 2025. And I'm like, well, I'm going to be out of office then. Who cares? But I'm like, but I did. I took our park director to Boston. I went to school in Boston. Our parks were designed by the same firm that did Boston. And we spent a week in Boston.
Olmsted Brothers?
The Olmsted Brothers, exactly. And so I rented a VRBO on Charles Street and in Leroy Eady and we drove down to Providence, Rhode Island, where their parks were also designed by, and I was like, I really wanted to do Riverfront Park, and so that was, and I'm like, how can we do that? And I also was very wary of raising taxes to do it. So we had a bond that was expiring, meaning that we had paid it off. And I said, well, let's go to the public and say, if you want to keep your taxes at the same rate, what do you think about this investment? So we brought them, Riverfront Park. I went to my first concert there last Sunday. Wow. I'd been to events at the Pavilion, but I had not been to a concert. And I was just like,
so good.
The head and the heart, it was amazing, and 10 minutes later, from my house, I live up on 30th here, 33rd. And I come down, my wife, and I literally, the park director is a good friend of mine. And I had called him, and I'm just like, so what can I take?
Right? Yeah.
My wife has to have a Ziploc bag, and he's like, and he sends me a picture of his refrigerator. You have to take soft-sided refrigerator bags. And I'm like, seriously, you can't? And I'm like, are you allowed to take chairs? And he's like, well, the low ones, like the beach. And I'm like, seriously? Because everybody else says you can't do this, you can't do this. You have to. You can bring your glasses, but that's it. And
not quite true.
No, and it was a blast. And he and I and his wife, we sat there, and a dear friend of mine that is a producer actually for the Today Show, grew up in Spokane. He was here, and he brought his mom, and we're sitting there, and I'm just like, and we bought a beer, and we had some, food in our bag, and it was awesome.
Isn't it amazing that the sun starts to
set? You should see the pictures. I was just like, and
where do I live?
I know,
Spokane.
And 5,000 people on a Sunday afternoon Sunday evening are sitting downtown, and I do quite a bit of traveling back and forth to Seattle with my job, but I love watching people in the planes lean over to take a picture of the lighted, and as it's going, and I'm just sitting there going, and that was controversial too, which was interesting because they wanted us to, there was people that wanted us to put the canvas back on it, and for many different reasons, and I'm like, thank God we didn't.
You know what?
Grass doesn't grow under canvas.
I was a they.
Oh,
and I thought
you were one of them.
Yeah, I could be like,
you lied because
yes.
I showed pictures of it with the tarp on it when we were going to the public. Because they did some artist renderings saying this is what we're thinking about, and that's what you take to the public. To and I was for it.
Well, that's what I got in my mind. It's like, it's going to be like that Australian, place you can put pictures on it. But you know what? I was wrong because this is awesome. Yeah. So good.
And that whole grass hillside. I remember when I was like, because there was a lot of pressure. Our park board, some of my dear friends of mine that were on the park board, they're like, David, we got to put this thing back on it because that's what you took out when you sold it. And I'm like, and so the engineers come to me and they're just like, we also want to put grass in there. Grass doesn't grow in the dark. And I'm like,
Well, thank you because we were wrong because that is a.
So one of my dear friends, I took a picture of the sunset. And actually, it was worse. I took a video because it was just gorgeous from one side to the other. And I sent it to him when I was sitting there, and I go, looks pretty good, park board, And he sent me back, and he goes, yes, it does. Because he was like, which they weren't wrong in the sense of this is what you showed the public, and I'm sitting there going, yeah, but those are artist renderings. We really hadn't thought it all through. And they're
like, just painting a different vision. It's like, you've got a knack for it, and I think that's what we can do. Like you're saying in Spokane, if it kind of ties some stuff together, it's like it does take partnerships. A lot of people have to do it. How do you build trust quickly? Because when we're trying to do big things, we have to pull people together.
Well, one, you don't do it. You don't do it quickly.
Okay.
And we're talking about a lot of the things that were great in the One Spokane strategic plan but we had a lot of failures in there and partnerships that didn't come together. And we aren't going to dwell on those, but to sit there,
sure, you can't have 100% wins.
Yeah, and
just
so
that's not real.
And we had some broken trust there in some of them because, I always say with the strategic plan, if it's strategic, it's hard to do and it's controversial. Because you're trying to do something different than how you do it today, and there's a lot of vested interest, and then there needs to be a huge amount of trust because some of it is kind of a leap of faith. You're kind of like, I think this is going to be okay. We'll use the pavilion for an example. You're sitting there going, what if this doesn't work out? What if those big lights annoy the heck? What if, what if, and you're just sitting there going, and so there's some misses, that actually came to fruition, and there's some. If you go back to the Google One Spokane strategic plan, you'll see, and you're like, whatever happened to that? Well, it died on the floor because, of mistrust and not bringing the right coalition together. Maybe the vision and the expectations maybe, couldn't get realized, But, one of our visions was to have this North Bank sports complex, and I don't know how much time we have, but, one of my thoughts was, even before COVID, is I worried about downtowns, and people rightfully so, were critical of me of focusing too much in downtown and and that sort of thing, and I'm not, and I did, there was a lot of focus, and there's a season and a time for everything, but and so we did, but I was worried about downtowns, and I had gone to Pittsburgh and a few other places. One great thing about mayors, what does happen fast with mayors, is you get to know each other really fast because you're kind of speed dating because everybody's on a time clock, right? Because you're only in for 4 years, so you kind of, when you go to conferences, you're like, who do I get to and how do I learn from them? And I want to get to your city. And then, it's the best is to go to a city that's hosted, a conference that's hosted by a mayor because, they're
going to roll out the red carpet.
Totally, And so I remember looking at these different cities and I worried, about what's going to be the future of downtowns. And I used to talk about, you now get your, packages at home, you can work from home. And then COVID just exacerbated that, right? And you really, so I thought you need to become an event city. And you go, well, that's rocket science, David. And I'm like, well, no, because really you have to change what your template is. Restaurants are different. The lunch counter can't function at an event, right? A sit-down dinner place can't really function, so just as an example, I would use an example of like a David's Pizza is an event-based restaurant. They have tables and everything.
You get in, and out.
You're out. You can go up to the counter if there's some waiters, but you also can just get up, get your piece of pizza, your beer, and go stand in the corner, right? Because you're going somewhere before you go somewhere. And so that has to change, or Flat Stick, those sorts of places, and so you need to make sure you have those types of restaurants. And, parking is a big issue. And even as we did Riverfront Park, I go, guys, we are so blessed and cursed. We have the most amazing park system in the world, but why would somebody leave their neighborhood park and come down to Riverfront Park?
Because they're pretty amazing too.
And so why would you blow past that park to get down? And so I go, we really have to think of Riverfront Park needs to offer something, so it's not going to be a swing set park. It's not going to be now, and if we do have swing sets, it needs to be a destination playground. It's not just, or we even, we looked at, we had an entire review with, is it Abel Washington? But basically, this is your world. It's
I would say,
fully accessible.
First fully accessible park that I'd ever seen. I didn't even know it was a thing.
Yeah,
it is our world.
Yeah, it is. and so we needed to make sure that people that were in wheelchairs or people that are mobility, issues. And so we have
our sensory park there. It's like,
the sensory park. So we literally, I said, so if you're going to go past your park and you're somebody that has an autistic child or something, you're like, yeah, I'm going to go downtown because this is where I'm going. Or the North Bank, believe that North Bank, since the beginning of time, the North Bank was vacant. If you went over there, it was gravel. I mean, you think about it, we never in all these years. And so what do you do with that? And people are like, well, we could sell it. And I'm like,
let's have a bigger vision.
Yeah. And so you're saying,
and
people are like, well, I don't like skate parks. And I'm like, well, kids do. And we need kids downtown, and I'm not a skater, but I'm just like, but it needs to be the coolest, damn skate park ever. Right. Or, we have, when I go past there, like after dinner with my wife, or we're at an event at the arena, and it's 9-10 o'clock at night, the lights are on in the basketball court and people are playing basketball. And I'm just like, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And so that vision, and now, I have to give it to the mayor and the team now with the stadium. I was like, I failed. I failed at the stadium. But these are some of the things. It was too much. We were at the groundbreaking? It was a groundbreaking for the podium. And it was right when I was finishing being mayor, but that was another vision of ours to have that in partnership with that. And I literally, I'm up, you only get a few chances when you're mayor. I'm like, hey, and there's, 100 people there, 75 people there. I'm like, everybody turn around. And I go, look over there. I go, that's going to be the future site of a downtown stadium. And I remember somebody that was pretty senior in authority who comes over to me and like, you are killing me. And I'm like, ah! But I didn't get it done. So like I said, so those partnerships still happen. Then the school board and the PFD and the city government came together. And I look at that. And what's really cool? My son is going to be a freshman next year. And I remember when we were first looking at it, it was just a hole, and we'd be over there at something. And my daughter, all my kids run, but my daughter really, and we went to the podium to see the women run, and but we're there, and I'm like, that's going to be a stadium. And my kids are like, yeah, when we're out of high school. And I'm like, we drove past it like a day ago, and I go, you realize you're going to be playing lacrosse in that this spring, Creighton? And he's like, no way. And I'm like, yeah way, you're going to be playing lacrosse there. And he's just like, and to have a city's ethos around wellness and sports and is who we are originally. So it wasn't like we were creating something that wasn't here.
No, we're just representing it in a different way. We have Hoop Fest,
but I go, let's just build on that. Let's put fuel on that fire to make it bigger. And what I really love about it is that they're participatory sports. This is, I would love to, NFL, Seahawks are great, Mariners great, all that. But what's cool about Spokane? We have both minor leagues and now with the soccer coming in, that's a whole nother story. But soccer coming in, they're professionals. Don't get me wrong, and they're experts in what they're doing. The Chiefs and the Indians, but they're relatable. At some point it gets to the point where you're just like, it's not super relatable for a young person to look at a great mentors, many NFL players, NBA players. But it's just it's winning the lotto to get into those. So but some of these other things,
like they can see themselves.
Yeah, they can see themselves there. I mean. And so that's what I love about it. This is the first year my kids participated in Hoop Fest, and I'd been to Hoop Fest. I mean, as the mayor, you're there. But it's
different when you're
it was so cool, and the app is cool, and I'm walking through downtown, and there's other families there. I was there stressed monger because the stuff when you're mayor to make sure that thing goes is not happy thoughts,
right.
It was right after the Boston Marathon, and we were worried about. I mean, and this is what my wife's like. You're finally not taking pictures of garbage cans and sweet, you know. And
Yes.
But literally, we were at the inauguration one year, and they had these big trucks full of sand around and that's to make sure no one drives into it. So then Hoop Fest, we did that. Well, now some ingenious person invented a new thing that they're these, they don't have to do that because they have a new barricade. So they don't have to do that, and you're like, well, but those, when you're mayor, these are the
you can't unsee
when you're a parent,
that.
you're just like, we better win that next game because my kids are gonna, get into the next, into this bracket, and that's what, so I get to care about being a dad again and just worrying about, being an overbearing dad on, in kids' sports, but to have that stuff come into our core, and I'll finish the. It's interesting, in a very divisive world, it's, for years, thousands of years. In many ways, churches brought people, especially generations. I'd say they didn't do so great in races. People always say, the most divided day of the week is Sunday, and you have the black churches and the white churches and the Filipino churches and all that. And that may be true that, in some days, maybe we need to, we do need to look at that. But it brought generations together. Sure. You had older people, you had younger people, that sort of thing. Neighborhoods came together. And you have to look at the data. We're the least church state in the nation, and I'm not, so I'm not here to say we need more churches, but what can we do to bring people together? Sports.
Yeah,
whether you can go out to an Eastern football game. Those are a blast.
Yeah, they are. Basketball games.
You can go to basketball games.
Too.
You can go to the GU games, and everybody is sitting there, old, young, white, black, brown, and they're all for a few hours on the same team. And I'm like, if we can bring that into downtown Spokane, this is going to be awesome. And it is interesting. You go out to an Indians game, same thing. You see families, you see grandparents with grandkids, you see single mom, all this, And for just a few hours, it's kind of la la land, right?
And we're all together.
And
vision realized, sir. Yeah, former Mayor Condon, thank you for joining us so much. I mean, you heard it here, everyone. Like, we're in this together. And come back next year. Celebrate year 2 with us.
Well, this has been
fun. This conversation ain't over. Like, we love talking to you.
Well,
Thank
thanks.
you.